Of course, this is the same silk." Alexandra turned her head smiling and said that Princess Patricia was right. "In Sylvanus, they are very proud of this silk, which they named after the country. It is Carial silk of the highest quality. It is a pure shade of red, but it did not become part of the tribute." The people around admired, and the Count was horrified, realizing that this was the silk that Sylvanus was proud of, and that Irugo's outfit was made from it. It began to dawn on Count Samuel that she realized in horror and alarm that this was a complete failure. After all, it is a perfect fit and symbolizes the unity of the two countries in the dress. The princess happily thought that the Count had fallen for his own trick. She received only one outfit from Emperor Sylvanus. And then the outfit got dirty and frayed along the way, but these hyenas did not know about it. So before the audience, she quickly took a favor from Theodore. They wouldn't have time to make a sylvan dress because it takes a lot of time to cut and sew. Luckily, Irugo's clothes pay attention to the flowy shape. The silhouette came out too simple, but having agreed to decorate the dress with chains and accessories, she managed to quickly finish it. She wondered if she should thank him for reacting the way she wanted. When the princess said that initially this silk was a gift for His Majesty Nathan, the king was surprised. She smilingly turned to His Majesty and asked to be allowed to consider it a wedding gift. The king was delighted with such speeches and such an unusual gift, symbolizing peace, and looking at her, stunned, he smiled joyfully. Laughing, he said that this was his gift for the princess, a gift with deep meaning that suited her perfectly. Frowning his eyebrows, he pierced the hall with a cold and sharp gaze and grinningly said that only the princess among them thinks about the peace and future of the two countries. But the next moment, the king peacefully said that she was probably tired and told the princess to sit down. The married couple suddenly looked happily at their friend, and Prince Theodore extended his hand to his bride. Smiling, he looked at Princess Alexandra and told her that she had exceeded all his expectations. Princess Sylvanus smiled complacently and cheerfully at her husband in response. Not far from them stood a maid who had recently approached and, with a trembling body and voice, addressed the princess and prince. Alexandra looked in surprise at the maid who addressed them and wondered what had happened and why she was trembling. Squeezing out the words, she instantly bowed sharply and apologizingly said that due to one mistake they had a shortage of chairs, so she could not escort them to their place. The girl and the prince were surprised, and King Irugo suddenly turned his head to the side and turned to the queen with a frown. The queen gasped in surprise and said blankly that it looked like the head maid had made a mistake. Nathan asked if she hadn't made sure of that. The woman told His Majesty that it was her fault. She was excited by the fact that the war was over and the old hostilities were no more. But both spouses knew that this was a lie. She instantly gasped in surprise and asked, pretending to be concerned what should they do because they are missing 2 chairs. As if pretending, she looked around the hall and, stretching her hand forward, pointed her finger at the far table and said that there were empty seats there. The courtiers worriedly thought that things were bad. The queen wanted to put them in the most insignificant place of all, where the servants' places were located. The king loudly addressed the queen, and she, in turn, asked His Majesty what was wrong with this. They could no longer force people to stand as if they were being punished. At the same time, when Prince Theodore looked irritably at his stepmother, the princess looked in the opposite direction and suddenly saw something. The queen selfishly and arrogantly said that these were just chairs and asked her husband not to attach much importance to them. She said that the princess was not so petty as to ruin the peaceful atmosphere over something like this. She asked if this was so and turned her head towards the girl. But contrary to her expectations, she opened her eyes in surprise. The princess joyfully looked towards the place that the queen had pointed out to her earlier. She was surprised that she had given her the farthest place. And she was happy about that too. The queen wondered if she knew in advance that she had lured the head maid to her side and was preparing a retaliatory strike as compensation. And finally, her husband noticed this inspired behavior of the princess, looking at her in surprise. The man looked worriedly at his wife, frowning and contorting his face, sweat dripping down him. She worried him. His instinct screamed at him that when she had that expression on her face, something dangerous was happening. The past flashed before her eyes, and it was with this expression on her face that she gave out the most unexpected phrases. He could not allow this to happen and, taking his wife by the hand, said that the reception had not yet begun, and the queen already looked intoxicated. The hypocritical and arrogant queen, looking at her stepson, asked what this meant, She was drunk. Theodore explained that otherwise she would not have seated the princess in the most distant place. The princess in itself can be called a symbol of peace. He hugged the bride. He could not believe that she would put such a person in the most insignificant place, or that something besides intoxication was gnawing at her. In fact, he was asking whether she had lost her mind in her old age. The Society of Aristocrats was very amazed that this eternally silent young man, His Highness Theodore, declared himself before secular society. It was admirable that he did all this just for the sake of the princess. The man looked seriously forward, and Alexandra looked at the groom in fascination. The queen said that, of course, she did not mean that, as she had said earlier, from the outside it might seem that they were forcing the princess to stand. So she simply offered her an empty chair. The next moment, the prince politely asked if someone could give her a seat then and turned his head towards the brothers and sisters. Theodore said that they were highly respected members of the Erugo royal family. Patricia and Michael were shocked. He looked at them with furious eyes and coldly said that he believed, for the sake of peace, they could vacate one chair. Mentally, he told them to just leave. Looking at their angry brother, the princesses thought that their end had come, and turning away and trembling, Michael thought that he would die. Therefore, he instantly raised his hand and said that for the sake of peace, and for the sake of the beautiful princess, of course he would give her his place. The third prince, the same age as Theodore, who was very afraid of him. The prince with golden eyes nodded his head and thanked Michael from the bottom of his heart, smiling. Prince Erugo was about to invite the princess to sit in the empty seat, but suddenly he noticed that the girl was standing still. But then Alexandra, looking at her husband, said that this was not enough, and said to go together. The husband and wife should be nearby. It's true, her business partner is trying hard for her, the princess thought then. Confidently, she decided that they had gone too far, and they could not allow Theodore to be imprisoned at a distance. And as if deciding to find a place for her husband, she went forward to the prince's tables. Princess Samira noticed that she was walking towards them. Worried and anxious, she wondered if she was coming to her because she mocked her the most. He lowered his head tremblingly. Samira thought about what she should do. Give up her seat right now, so she wouldn't be able to save her honor. But she was worried that the queen would notice. She didn't want to disgrace herself right in front of everyone, and frowned and clenched her teeth with force. But despite her worries, the Princess of Sylvanus quickly walked past her, maintaining her course. Samira looked in surprise at the back of the already departed princess, who said that they would become a married couple, so they should sit next to each other. Their marriage contract is a symbol of peace. Oh, by the way, Alexandra suddenly asked with a smile. She said that she was extremely happy about their wedding, and the next moment she addressed the princess informally. The second princess, Elizabeth, shuddered. The girl was trembling. The request to sit in someone's place also has political connotations, but there is no point in touching the dummy. Her goal is to be the most influential member of the royal family in the absence of the first Prince Harold. When Princess Alexandra gasped and asked the girl if she really didn't want to give up her place for them. Inside herself, she screamed about who would want to give way to such a fool like her, but in reality, she could not even say a word. In response, the princess, repeating the groom, looked at her coldly and angrily and mentally said that it was her mother who started this. Let her get out. The princess, almost crying, thought that the princess was crazy, yet the husband and wife were one Satan. Suddenly, King Irugo stood up for his daughter and said that Elizabeth had a sore leg and it was better for her to sit on a comfortable chair. Princess Sylvanusa turned around sharply and looked at Nathan, who was looking at her seriously, his daughter thanking her father for his help. Alexandra did not expect her father to intervene, and meanwhile his second daughter slyly said that she honestly really wanted to give up her place. Still, Princess Elizabeth is the king's main favorite. In this situation, one should not expect him to take her side. She asked if her sister understood that she, unlike others, had a fragile physique. Alexandra, smiling irritably, looked at her younger sister and thought how disgustingly she was behaving, because she was even larger than her, and said that she did not know that she was feeling bad. The bride asked if she was all right, and Elizabeth happily replied that although she was not in the best shape, she had to greet her sister. The next moment, the queen breathed out a sigh of relief when the pressure on her beloved daughter stopped. But instead, the king suddenly said. The queen turned cold and shuddered as she said, "The spouses should sit together," His Majesty explained. His wife looked in his direction, dumbfounded, and Nathan continued. As Theodore had said, there was a way to make room for them. The man ordered the servant to bring chairs. The maid nodded but asked where to put them. Then His Highness King Nathan said, "No need to worry," and said to put the chairs right here. Her Highness the Queen and her father, Earl Samuel, shuddered and looked at their king with concern and anger. Then the Count, stuttering, shouted to His Majesty that this was impossible, because this was the place for the Crown Prince. The king smiled. The Queen angrily said that the Count was right, because he knows that law and order should reign in the royal family. In response to her words, the husband simply laughed. And looking coldly at his arrogant wife, he said caustically that these were just chairs and they would put them in empty places. Shrugging his shoulders, the man said that nothing could be done about it, because she had made a mistake with the number of places. The Queen wrinkled her face angrily, pursing her lips and maintaining a semblance of a smile. And so the future spouses began to climb the stairs. They were illuminated by bright sunlight. At that moment, not only the people supporting the Queen, but also the neutral aristocrats were deeply amazed. People simply did not expect that the situation would change so much. Now Prince Theodore, who had previously avoided political decisions, has taken the lead, and the Queen has been pushed aside. Moreover, at the center of all this action was none other than the princess who arrived in their kingdom as a bride. Meanwhile, Alexandra, sitting down on the towering balcony, thought in surprise that everyone looked very small from above. The girl realized that from here she could see the entire hall, and covering her head with her hand, she began to turn her head from side to side. Immediately, her future husband called out to her and asked if she was looking for someone. The princess asked Theodore in surprise why he needed this. Then the young man explained that when the Queen gave her a distant seat, her gaze rushed somewhere to the end of the hall. The next moment, His Highness Theodore approached his bride's ear and asked her who he was, what that man was. The princess looked into the groom's eyes in surprise and frowned and said that this was a business secret and said not to come so close and sharply. It was scary. But the next moment the man turned his head into the hall and sadly said that it seemed to him that she didn't want to tell, and said that if it didn't cause problems, then he didn't care. And the princess breathed out a sigh of relief in response. She was glad that he did not start questioning her. But she turned her gaze to a man with muted orange hair and green eyes and realized that it looked like this was the same man whom she had seen through the eye of the emperor. All this happened a month ago. On the way from Silvanus with Arugo, Alexandra saw the future while she was collecting water. In this vision, the man addressed her as Her Highness and said that although he was insignificant, he wanted to become hers. Looking tearfully at the girl, he sincerely begged her to please accept him. Then she answered that it was good. He would happily smile back. The man embarrassedly asked if everything would be okay because she knew that he was, but the girl interrupted him by putting her finger to her lips and said, "No words needed. She understands everything." She joyfully said, grabbing the guy by the shoulders, that he would become the best in this country, no, on the entire continent, the best blacksmith, and she would do it with him, and that was where the vision ended. To be honest, Alexandra began to think she was a little surprised to see such a picture, being a bride in this country, because at first the image looked like a scene from an immoral romance. However, it was unexpected that they met like that at a banquet. Meanwhile, Theodore continued to drink wine and occasionally glance at his bride, then at the man she liked. And although he didn't show it, this irritated the future husband very much, and he frowned in thought. The blacksmith, that means who will become the main workforce in her business plan. The princess wanted to talk to him right now. But today, she had already made a fuss. It was better to sit quietly until the end of the holiday. The Queen at that moment was thinking whether she even understood what kind of place this was, and how dare she. And finally, after a while, the hot food was brought, and all the people began to eat the freshly prepared meat. Princess Alexandra continued to glance at the man she saw in charge, and was surprised that his hand was fine. But in the future, she saw that he had no thumb on his right hand. But she still doesn't know what the relationship is between them, and why she was so confident in her words. And Alexandra also thought that she wanted to prevent his injury before it was too late, because injury for a blacksmith is fatal. I thought if there was no way to save the hand of a man who would be betrayed to her, I would need to find out about him as soon as the banquet was over. The girl cut off a piece of meat from the whole steak served, and when she put it in her mouth, she was very, very surprised. Continuing to chew, her face retained admiration for every note of taste because it was very tasty. The texture of the meat is juicy and sinewy. It seemed to melt in your mouth. The potatoes, smeared with butter, are so aromatic and soft that they go well with the sauce and meat. When she finished her portion, a maid came up to her and said that if she had eaten everything, that she could refresh herself with help. The princess finished the sentence for her and said, "Jelly frin-fran." Alexandra was simply happy when she tried this dessert. The sweet and sour taste of the jelly really explodes in her mouth like firecrackers. When she realized that she had eaten everything in an instant, it was even a pity. And she thought that at the meeting with the king, the bowl was completely filled. Suddenly, Prince Theodore exhaled humbly and moved his portion of jelly towards his future wife. Instantly, the girl looked in surprise at her future husband, and His Highness said that he did not like it. The girl asked if she could then eat it. "As you wish." The man turned his head to the side in embarrassment and said to his future wife, and the girl broke into a smile. When she turned to Theodore and smilingly said that although he was a bit of a pervert, he was an excellent partner. The guy asked in surprise what she had just said. The girl replied that she called him a good partner. The guy wanted to ask about what she said before, but fell silent. The girls looked at them admiringly, and they said that they looked great together and wondered what they were chatting so sweetly about. One of the ladies was wondering whether she should try to start a conversation with the princess after the banquet. The black-haired lady told her friend that she was the first and said to get in line. Her friends just laughed, and Diana quickly left the girls without even saying goodbye. Running away into the corridors, she thought how their relationship could change in an instant, and why only she should feel awkward. Suddenly, the next moment, because of her tears, she did not see the person in front and crashed into him. Having fallen, she was about to rudely ask who it was, when suddenly, raising her head, she realized that it was her acquaintance. The man in armor asked Diana what had happened. The girl had already risen to her feet, embarrassedly hiding her tears, and said that it was nothing special. "But you are crying," the man said loudly, and asked if this was really connected with His Highness Theodore. The girl shuddered. Diana remembered how the man she liked had a nice conversation with some princess, and tears appeared in her eyes again. She said that Mr. Theodore was very worried about her, and said that the fact was that his future wife was interested in another man. How does a man with heterochromia and a large scar covering half his face sharply frown and ask what this means? After the official meeting of Irugo and Sylvanus, Theodore's gloomy palace came to life for the first time in a long time. The ladies discussed the recently arrived princess, calling her a beauty. This was not only because the princess turned out to be elegant and beautiful, but because of an incident in which the queen was humiliated. The maids enthusiastically and dreamily thought that their mistress was the best, and that she and the prince were very suitable for each other. The next moment, the two maid friends looked at each other, smiling happily, and thought that they were looking forward to their wedding. At the same time, the princess was sitting in Theodore's palace in a room specially allocated for her and writing something on paper. Irugo produces a large volume of high-quality steel. If you combine the blacksmith she found and Irugo metallurgy, the success of the business is guaranteed. But at the same time, she will be able to fulfill the king's wish and rid the kingdom of the stigma of barbarians, the girl thought, when suddenly she was called out. The princess turned her head, and then the maid asked if she had heard. Her wedding dress would be made using Sylvan fabric and Irugo traditions, like at the banquet, she said. It looked like her efforts had not been in vain, she thought, when another maid said that the designer had sent sketches and asked which one she liked best. Then Alexandra said without interest that she would wear what he sewed the companion with. The scar watched all this with displeasure. She exhaled ostentatiously and turned her head away and said that the dress would still be in the Irugo style, and asked what they call it, a symbol of peace, and called it all nonsense. The curly-haired maid provided by the prince angrily asked what she was saying. Alexandra did not care. How then, the faithful hunting dog, Rosemary asked, how she dares to speak so disrespectfully about Her Highness the Princess, laughs at her achievements, and continues to be her chambermaid. She was interested in whether there was a place in her head for such bad thoughts. The girl with the scar asked if she had really become the princess's mongrel. The maid said menacingly, "If you want to argue, then do it outside." Peaceful life, the chambermaids quarrel among themselves, so they do not have enough strength for her. The inhabitants of Irugo change the nights, and she also eats deliciously and sleeps well. thought Alexandra. A maid with brown hair drove away the arguing ladies and said that a wedding only happens once. The princess's opinion is extremely important. She asked if she wanted anything. That's right. They suddenly supported Rihanna and firmly told her to tell her that she liked her. Even if it was something small, they would do anything. No, the princess said. She doesn't need anything, and they are too zealous. But suddenly she started thinking. And remembering the little thing she liked, she said that she had something her chambermaids unanimously loudly asked what it was, already ready to perform new tasks. The princess closed her eyes smiling and remembered the moment when she first basked in her large and soft bed. And she told the maids that she wanted something soft. The girls' mouths opened in surprise and their faces turned red. Then the maid with a short ponytail asked what she meant. The princess smilingly said that she needed something soft so that her mood would improve when she lay down. At that moment, the man behind the door stopped his step and shuddered and began to listen. Jonathan, who was with him, shuddered and blushed. Rihanna thoughtfully and joyfully said that she had exceeded their expectations. The maid with curls said that the piece that no one would disturb was important. She was wise, embarrassed. The third asked if it would be better if it were not only soft, but also wide. Alexandra looked questioningly at the girls and said that it doesn't have to be wide, but it won't be too narrow either because regardless of the size, there will still be room. There will be room left. This phrase simply drove the chambermaids crazy. They were so excited and thought that they would definitely sleep in an embrace. Standing outside the door, the man was extremely surprised and discouraged by such conversations from the ladies. His cheeks even turned a little pink. Jonathan, who also heard all this, was very embarrassed and turned away and cleared his throat. Theodore would have been simply in shock. Okay, Rihanna said enthusiastically. Then they will leave to find the perfect thing for her. The curly-haired maid said that they would amaze her and told her to be ready. Leaving the room, the girl with curly hair joyfully said that Mr. Theodore would also be surprised when suddenly she saw the gentleman in front of her. Alexandra calmly waved her hand at her future husband and told him to come in, while her chambermaids froze in fear. Meanwhile, in the yard, the girls continued to fight among themselves, tearing out each other's hair. Look at them. Suddenly a male voice said. The angry young ladies turned their heads sharply in the direction of the sound and, frowning irritably, asked what he said. The man looked at them menacingly with his dissatisfied, frowning and irritated face with a huge scar. The ladies instantly gasped loudly at the sight of such a terrible sight and fearfully took several steps back. The man, looking down at them rudely, said to tell the princess, because judging by their clothes, they were her chambermaids, that General Nigel wants to visit her. The ladies of the court, shaggy after the fight, avoided him and began to fear him even more when they remembered what General Nigel was like. This is one of the closest people to Prince Theodore. He actually has a terrible scar, and they say that he scared the soldiers with his monstrous physique. With his piercing gaze, he looked irritably at the maids and menacingly asked what they were looking at, ordering them to escort him. The girls, afraid of such a scary and huge man, said in one voice, good and thought, why does he need a princess? In turn, Nigel thought that all Sylvans were cowardly, and of course that their mistress was the same, because Diana did not waste words. Her brother Charles was also a devoted warrior, so much so that he was ready to sacrifice his life for them. Then he sat down on one knee and, turning to His Highness, said that he would be bait with which to catch the monsters. He was a loyal and handsome young man. Then he personally told him that if anything happened to him, he would take care of his sister. He remembered how Diana told him that she only wanted happiness for Theodore, let him find a good companion and live happily. He must have misunderstood everything. Does the princess who will marry already have someone else? And if this is true, then he feels sorry for His Highness Theodora, and the man hit the wall sharply. If everyone liked the princess, then her admirers got excited, Nigel thought. Why is Diana worse? He promised the Princess of Sylvanus that he would find evidence of her character and reveal the truth to everyone. There is a famous experiment called Pavlov's dog, which is that if you ring a bell before each meal, the dog will soon begin to salivate at the sight of the bell. And although she was not a dog, the princess thought, if Theodore came, then soon there would be tea. And if they brought tea, they would serve desserts with it. The future husband walked into the room looking embarrassed and puzzled as he looked at her with his arms folded across his chest. Alexandra was wondering what they would bring today and with what tea. But in fact, if you turn to the servants, this issue can be easily resolved. But because in Alexandra's mind this territory was Theodore's property, she felt that it would be rude to ask someone to satisfy her desires. When Theodore ascends to the throne, she will finally be able to free herself from the danger of being killed by the mercenary of Emperor Silvanus. And with the help of his capital, he will be able to confidently purchase what he wants to eat. Prince Irugo pursed his lips and thought that they had decided to become work partners. So why? The man said that he heard her conversation with the servants. The princess responded by saying that she explained everything clearly. She likes it when it's soft. The future husband looked at his bride in shock. He even stuttered in his thoughts that she had specifically highlighted this. And while her partner was thinking about how he should perceive this, the princess watched him with interest. Princess Alexandra, smiling, turned to her partner by name and asked if he knew this. The guy was simply stunned so much that he seemed to have lost touch with the real world, simply freezing. But the next moment, the princess brought him out of his thoughts when she called him by name again. Theodore shuddered in surprise. When His Highness the Prince suddenly stood up and hit the table with his hand, he said that he would not do this to her. His face turned red with shame and embarrassment because of such dialogues and his own depravity, which made him turn around sharply. And the next moment, like a small child, he quickly ran away from his future wife, only his long hair left a trace behind him. Running out of the room, he almost hit the maid who brought them tea, and after he ran away there was a pause. The maid asked if he was leaving already, while Sasha wondered what he would not do. The chambermaid said that she had only brought tea and it seemed was very late, but the princess said to just leave everything here so as not to waste the goods. Today they have apricot jam and strawberry compote, as well as pie with clotted cream. The girl was surprised. There were 2 servings, double luck. And while she was thinking where to start, she was already bringing the pie to her mouth when suddenly the ladies of the court burst into the room and said that trouble had happened. While Alexandra looked at them displeasedly, Rosemary said that a barbarian had come to her and called himself General Nigel. He persistently asked them to bring him to her, and they had no choice. The princess thought for a moment and asked who this Nigel was. She had not seen him at the banquet. Then Rosemary asked how it was that she did not know General Nigel. He was close to Prince Theodore, just like Jonathan and James. The lady with the scar said that this ruthless man scared the Sylvans terribly. It seems that he decided to devote his life to Irugo. The princess said that she thought they went outside to get rid of excess energy, but in fact, they were still full of energy. They set up a house here and thought about it. And then she said to invite the general to come in. Her faithful hunting dog and the always dissatisfied lady with the scar were terribly surprised. And finally, General Nigel walked into the room of the princess and the future wife of his master. There was a tense atmosphere in the room. With a menacing look and the same unkind intentions, he came closer, and looking at Alexandra sitting on a chair, said that his name was Nigel, General of His Highness Theodore. The man looked at the girl in front of him with a dissatisfied expression, frowning. And so, as he heard, as he thought, she was very small, and he understood that right now she would be dumbfounded and then scream. Although he is disgusted by this reaction, today the scar will work in his favor because he came to warn the princess. He thought he would tell her, just try to leave His Highness Theodore and look at other men, when his thoughts were interrupted and the princess said, "Welcome." Stocky, intimidating and huge, he shuddered when the princess greeted him with a smile as Theodore's man. A white and terribly sweet face looked at him, with gorgeous amethyst-cold eyes and a bright smile. The menacing man tensed. He thought why she was so sincerely happy. He used a menacing tone and came fully armed. Besides, she doesn't even wince when she looks at his scar. This was a first for him and was very surprising. But it didn't matter, he suddenly thought, and then, gritting his teeth, he raised his head proudly and said that he heard she was asking about another man. In response, the girl happily said that this was true and asked, couldn't he sit down? Her neck hurt. This large and formidable bear was very surprised, and Alexandra asked Rosemary and Beatrice not to stand, but to bring tea to General Nigel. The girls were only too glad to leave quickly. The princess became thoughtful. Theodore asked her at the banquet why she was showing interest in that man, why she was looking at him. But she could not tell him and only answered that it was a business secret. But in order to find out more about him, she needed to join forces with Theodore because she has no support here. However, after the reception, Theodore became grumpy, so she had no choice but to turn to the servants. But even those questions did not bear fruit. Just in time, Theodore's servant appeared in front of her. She realized that Theodore, too, was a little shy to help directly, which is why the princess thought that he felt spiritually guilty for continuing to refuse to cooperate with her. Meanwhile, Big Nigel barely fit at the small table and, surprised by this situation, thought that he had not planned this. This cute big guy with a scar covering half his face was uneasy with anxiety and worry. He wondered what was happening and why. The general did not understand how it happened that he was eating delicate cakes with the Princess Thumbelina. The princess asked if he would help. The man answered yes, questioningly. Alexandra, wanting to make sure that he understood what they were talking about, asked if he would help with finding the man. The general hesitantly answered yes, and then changed his mind. And while the girl looked at him questioningly, waiting for an answer, the general was completely crushed, not understanding anything. Then the princess, frowning, asked him what he was saying. What kind of answer is yes? Not like that. The man, unsure of anything at all and embarrassed, covered his mouth with his palm. Great General Nigel, blushing, admitted to himself that he had been caught. Without noticing it, he had fallen for the princess's bait. And why should he help her look for a man? The emotionless Princess Alexandra asked whether he would help her or not. In response, the man embarrassedly turned his head to the side and cleared his throat. He thought, then how is he different from the courtiers and warriors who made a fuss about the arrival of the princess? She thinks that if she makes everyone open their mouths in front of her, he will be able to control Irugo as he wishes, but he decided that he would make her realize reality, and hitting the table, he pointed his finger at her. And he told the princess to get it into her little head. Today he came to her, Nigel said with a frown and fell silent. Alexandra looked at her fiancé's man in surprise and asked him, tilting her head to the side, what he had come for. The thing is, he fell silent again. Suddenly he had an annoying feeling. The intuition that had always saved him on the battlefield told him that there was no point in getting angry now. But why did he wonder why there was such a feeling that suddenly the puzzle in the general's head had come together? That's right, he thought. Now he doesn't need to be angry. On the contrary, he needs to pretend that now he will help her, and then catch her red-handed, irrefutable evidence. In this case, no words will save her. The princess looked at him in surprise. She never tried to lure Nigel with eloquence. How then the general changed his position and folded his arms across his chest, smiling, and said that he had come to help her find out about that man. It seems so, the Princess of Sylvanus suddenly said thoughtfully, and thanked him. The man said why, but he himself thought and was glad that she did not suspect anything, due to the fact that everyone was babysitting her. Leaning closer, Alexandra said that she was just thinking about what she should do, since for now her freedom of action is limited and she cannot send away the maids. And also to go outside alone to meet him. The man cleared his throat and told her to continue. He was fine. Looking at the papers, she tucked her hair behind her ear and said that her servant had told her everything about him, but she still didn't know much. In the general's mind, the girl was innocent and unhappy, and was plaintively interested in what he loved and what was interesting to him. Then the man angrily and loudly asked his master's bride why she was interested in him, to which the princess asked why he asked her about this. The general covered his mouth with his hand. He remembered that he was now collaborating with her, and first she had to fall for it, and then he would catch her at the crime scene. But the girl, without hiding her intentions, happily answered that the fact was that she wanted to lure him. The man fell from his chair. The girl worriedly asked Nigel if something hurt him. The man, getting up, denied it, and thought that Diana was right. He knew everything, but for some reason, his mood changed so much. He was able to find out her secret. This should cause satisfaction, and then the man roared and asked how she could abandon their prince. Patting the general on the back, the girl joyfully replied that this was not the case, that man had a different talent and excellent physical shape, unlike Theodore. Nigel asked. She wanted to say that His Highness is in poor physical shape. It's not bad, he's just good at something else, she answered. Then the general said to stop. He did not intend to listen to this nonsense. The princess looked at the man in surprise and thought that she didn't know why Nigel was inconsistent in his decisions. He belongs to that class of people who consider their commander the strongest man in the world. She didn't want to say it, but she just needed to embellish it a little. Scratching her nose, she said, slightly embarrassed, that she also considered Theodore an excellent partner who was not inferior even physically. The general shuddered at the words of a physical partner. He continued to look at his commander's bride with his mouth open and thought that His Highness was not yet married, but he was moving very quickly. Previously, little girls like this little one had to be fed 7 times a day. He wondered how he could touch her. When suddenly Alexandra informed the general that the man was a blacksmith, the man suddenly raised his head, and the smiling princess said that Theodore is a warrior. But this does not mean that he is better than Theodore. Blacksmith? He asked in surprise. The lady answered correctly. There are many excellent blacksmiths in Arugo, and she just needs one. As the girl thought about it, she was not going to say that she needed a blacksmith, and looked at the general kneeling. She thought that he was sent by Theodore, so there should be no difficulties in digesting such information, but the man wondered why she was talking about it. And so the princess said that in order for Irugo to be able to withstand the endlessly increasing number of monsters, an outstanding blacksmith must forge an even more outstanding sword. Irugo has no equal in metallurgy and metal smelting. Such magnificent art testifies to the history of Irugo's battles and the monsters of the Great Plain. The general said that he, Princess Silvanusa, does not know such facts, but she turns out to be aware. How could she not know? There is a big difference between them, and heard that Arugo's sword can cut the skin of a monster with one blow. Nigel grinned at the words about the skin and said that if you put an aura on the sword, you can cut bones. Only Arugo's sword can withstand such a load. It's simply incredible that the princess said, and sat down, raising it proudly. But the general said, but the Sylvans squeak that their ancient swords are barbaric, that their swords are like decorative toys. Alexandra said that the Sylvans know that the famous sword Arugo is incredibly good. They just don't want to admit it. They are all narcissists. I completely agree, said General Nigel. Don't feed them bread, let them boast. The princess said that they are world champions in pride. The man agreed. Suddenly, at the moment, he realized what he was doing was justified by the fact that he was only pretending to be kind to her in order to get closer and then catch her at the scene of the crime. This is his strategy, his plan. The next moment he looked away, and the princess's gaze was drawn to the weapon on his back. He turned his back on the princess